You know, every single time a house is sold, there's this hidden, high-stakes process going on behind the scenes. And if it goes wrong, it can cost millions. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on mortgage quality control. It's like the invisible safety net of the entire housing market. And we're going to find out what happens when that net has a massive hole in it.
Okay, think of it this way. You go out and buy a brand new car, right? It looks amazing, drives like a dream. But then, a year down the road, bam, a critical engine flaw pops up. A flaw that was there from the very beginning. Well, that's exactly what can happen with a mortgage. A loan can look absolutely perfect on paper, but a hidden defect is just waiting to cause trouble long after the ink is dry. So, what happens then?
So to really get a handle on this, we first need to understand what we're actually talking about when we say a loan defect. Because believe me, it's a lot more serious than just a typo on a form.
Yeah, a loan defect isn't some minor slip-up. It's a significant error, maybe something was left out or something's just plain wrong, and it breaks the rules. But most importantly, it injects real financial risk into the system.
And here's the really scary part, the ticking time bomb element. These things often aren't caught right away. They can sit there, dormant, in a loan file for months, sometimes even years. A family has already moved in, they're living their lives, and this thing can just explode into a huge problem way down the road.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth do these critical errors even happen in such a tightly regulated industry? Well, the answer is pretty surprising. It often has less to do with the loan itself and a lot more to do with the wild swings of the economy.
Yep, the number one culprit behind most of these defects isn't necessarily a careless employee, it's market volatility. It's the chaos and the unpredictability of the financial world that creates the absolute perfect storm for mistakes to happen.
All right, so let me break down how this actually works. In a stable market, everything's cool, calm, and collected. Predictable. But then, let's say interest rates suddenly drop. All at once you get this massive refinance surge. Lenders who might have just laid people off are suddenly buried under a mountain of applications. And what happens when you're overwhelmed? You rush. And that rushed work, well, that's the breeding ground for errors.
And as Phil McCall, an industry COO, points out here, the connection is crystal clear. As soon as the crazy volume of loans goes back to normal, the number of defects does too. It's this predictable, painful cycle of chaos and calm.
Okay, so we get why these defects happen. But what's the real cost here? We're talking about a seemingly minor mistake, found months later, that can set off a financial chain reaction with, and I'm not exaggerating, multi-million-dollar consequences.
The absolute biggest consequence is something called a loan buyback. This is pretty much the ultimate financial penalty. See, if a lender sells a loan to an investor, and then a major defect is found later on, that lender is contractually obligated to buy the entire loan back, usually at a huge loss. And like Phil McCall says, that's exactly when a small mistake starts to get really expensive. I mean, can you imagine having to buy back a $500,000 mortgage just because of a clerical error made during a rush a year ago? The pressure is just immense.
So where are these mistakes popping up the most? Well, issues with verifying someone's income and employment, that's the big one, making up about 40% of all defects. But the real rising threat is in asset and valuation. Think about it. In a shaky market where home prices might be falling, getting that appraisal wrong becomes an incredibly expensive, super high-risk problem.
So with the stakes this high, the industry is finally realizing it can't just run around cleaning up messes after they've already happened. The whole game is shifting, from finding mistakes to stopping them from ever happening in the first place.
The old school way was totally reactive. You'd audit a tiny sample of loans after they were already done and just cross your fingers you'd catch the big errors. But the new philosophy? It's all about being proactive. It's about using technology to scan every single loan for potential red flags before the deal is even finalized. The goal isn't just to find mistakes anymore, it's to prevent them entirely.
But here's the thing, and it's a really crucial point. Technology by itself isn't some magic fix. What the source material makes perfectly clear is that the lenders who are really nailing this are the ones where the operations teams, the people actually making the loans, and the risk teams, the ones checking them, are talking to each other constantly. Tight communication is key.
Now, technology is obviously the engine that's going to drive this new proactive defense, but in an industry as traditional and as heavily regulated as mortgage lending, actually adopting that tech isn't as simple as just, installing some new software.
Let's look at a real-world case. A company called ACES Quality Management just bought a tech firm called Basecap, and their whole strategy is to use tech to first clean up all the messy loan data,
then test entire portfolios all at once to find risky patterns. But here's the game-changing step. They're also building automated workflows to actually manage and fix the thousands of potential problems this kind of massive testing is going to uncover.
I mean, this sounds like a no-brainer, right? A smarter, faster, more complete way to make sure loans are solid. So that begs the question, why isn't every single lender in the country already on board with this?
Well, the roadblocks are basically baked into the DNA of the mortgage industry. It is incredibly regulated. It deals with our most sensitive personal data. And there's this deep-seated fear that if a new technology messes up, it could mess up at a massive scale, affecting thousands of loans all at once. All of that creates a very, very cautious culture, one that's pretty slow to adopt what it considers risky, bleeding-edge tech.
And that leaves the entire industry at a fascinating crossroads. Everyone knows technology is the key to managing risk in this volatile world. But they're also, and you can't blame them, super nervous about handing over the keys. Which leads us to this one final really interesting question. As AI gets more and more powerful, who do we want as the ultimate guardian of loan quality? The seasoned human expert with years of intuition, or the potentially flawless but still totally unproven machine?